Hey everyone, I'm Joshua Deemer, and welcome back to Lesson 13 of our Java Programming Tutorial series. Let's jump right into the lesson. Now I realize I have a lot of comments inside of my code already that I have showed you guys, but let's go over it really quick. This is a single line comment. So what this means is that when Java runs your program, when the compiler runs your program, it's going to skip this, where it's going to skip anything after this slash essentially. Rather than a single line, it's more along the lines of an inline. So if I said something like public int x, you could have it on the same line. However, you can't say something like public int and then x like this, because it's anything after this slash that is ignored, and it's only on that line. So sometimes you'll see me do something like slash so that I don't need to delete it and I can easily add it back in. Okay? But you can comment to your code such as, this is the x coordinate, right? You can comment your code so that people know a little bit more about it. The second type of comment is called a multi-line comment. That's when you put a slash and then a asterisk or a star. You press enter and it'll automatically format it for you. And you can type hello world, and you can do multiple lines like this. You don't need these asterisks here. Eclipse auto-generates them for you. But you have your slash asterisk, then asterisk slash, and that's where your comment ends. Then you have your code again. Okay? This also can be a single line comment. So if I do slash asterisk slash right here and say hello world, this works perfectly fine. Your Java will ignore these lines of code or these sections of code because they are comments. Now, summaries are a little bit different than comments. So if I were to say, for example, do slash asterisk enter, this now becomes a summary. What that means is if we type in this is the x coordinate and hover over x, it'll say this is the x coordinate inside of it. So let's go ahead and create a constructor and say int total is equal to x plus y. Through this, we can hover over x and know what x is all about because of our summary. If we hover over y, you'll notice there is no such summary. So it's slash asterisk and then enter. Then you say this is the y coordinate. Hover over y, and it'll pop up this is the y coordinate. You can do this with local variables like this total inside of example, but I don't really suggest that. That's going overboard. Just a slash is enough for that. Okay? You can do this with constructors and methods. So if we say public void or public int add and then return x plus y, we can do slash star or asterisk, press enter, and it'll automatically fill certain things out. So add the x and y coordinates together, return the resulting x and y sum. Okay, so you can do that, and if you hover over add, it'll say add the x and y coordinates together and return the resulting x and y sum. Okay, you can do this with your constructors as well. Create a new example. You can do this with your classes as well. Just an example class. So if I say inside of here example e equals new example, I realize this would throw an error because we're basically doing an infinite loop in here, but if we hover over example, create a new example, hover over this example, just an example class. So it's grabbing the classes, and this one's grabbing the constructors, as it should. If you want to do parameters, such as like this, then you can do the same thing, and it'll automatically add param x and param y. So if we type in the left hand of the equation, the right hand of the equation, the sum of x and y, add two numbers together. Okay, we'll just say it's like that. If we say add and open up the xy, then type xy, and we hover over add, it says exactly what we typed, just in a nice little format like this. Alright, so let's get some practice in. I'm not going to explain what this does just yet, but I did make a semi-complicated game. So let's go ahead and run it, see what it does. So it says, welcome, try to survive as long as you can. Joshua has 100 HP and 10 food remaining. What should you do? Eat, heal, or defend. So if you choose to defend, it'll say you defended from mob's attack and Joshua reduces the damage taken. You got whacked by mob and Joshua loses 12 HP. So now I have 88 and 10 food. Well, let's go ahead and heal. So it says Joshua healed 42 HP, but he loses 3 food from healing. So now I have 100 HP, but 7 food. And so if I eat, then I lose 18 HP from getting whacked, and I gain my 3 food back. And so these are all random numbers. If I press D a bunch of times, it says I lose 5 HP, now 12, now 10, now 5, now 14, now 11, now 11, and so now my health is low. And if I lose all my health, then I'll say, unfortunately, you have died. Okay? So you survived 12 turns. It keeps track of your turns. Thanks for playing. You can also do this. So if you heal, you'll notice it takes food. If you take too much food, then you will have died as well, and you survive 4 turns. So using what we've learned so far with our commenting, I've used almost every technique that I have taught on this channel or on this playlist so far. So what can we do to help make this more understandable? Sure, we can look through it line by line and explain it, but what programmers do like are comments and summaries. So let's start inside of player. So up here we have our public class player. Well, let's make a summary up here and say something along the lines of this is the player. And just something simple like that. Then we can do a summary for the max health. This is the maximum health of the player. And we can continue doing this. This is the maximum amount of food the player can have. And then we can do something simple for these. The player's username. The player's health. The player's food. And we can do something here, such as this creates a new player and sets the health and food to their maximum. The username of the player. Okay. Now we can do the same with everything else, so let's go ahead and do that. We're practicing after all. Heals the player the amount given. Does not go beyond the maximum health. The amount to heal the player. Okay, I'll go ahead and copy this to feed. And then feeds the player the amount given, does not go out of the maximum food limit. Then the amount to feed the player. So starves the player the amount given, does not go beyond 0. Yeah, and then the amount to heal, or the amount to starve the player. Then we can do the same with damage. Make sure the name matches the parameter. So damages the player the amount given, does not go beyond 0, the amount to damage the player. Okay. Now, is dead. Checks if the player has no health or no food. Whether or not the player has no health or food. And we can do report, which is the last one inside the player class, such as reports the player's health and food. So now we can just simply say, all right, this player class is complete. Okay, so I'll exit out. And now if we hover over player, it is decently documented, right? So if I hover over feed, it says feeds the player the amount given, does not go beyond the maximum food limit, the amount to feed the player. So you can see that with everything a player. So now let's work on some of our inline comments. So create a new player named Joshua. No semicolon. Create the scanner to be able to accept input. Create the random number generator. Keeps track of how many turns the player has taken and starts at 0. The game loop to keep the while loop going. The prelude. The prelude part 2. Continue looping until the game loop is turned off. Ask the player what to do. The line retrieved from the user input. The line gets lowercased. Okay, so I can keep going like this. I'm gonna start making it a little more brief because it'll take a long time for me to go through every single line. But valid is the input was or was not valid. Then we've got randomly take / give food and health. And we've got damage / feed the player. Notify of what happened. Then repeat. Then repeat. And then if any other input was given, then alert the inputter. So now here, if the input was invalid, skip the rest of this loop. Increase. Otherwise, if the input was valid, then increase the amount of turns. Report the player's stats. Check if the player died. If so, exit the loop. Tell how many, so this is outside the loop, so tell how many turns the player survived. Then release the scanner's resources. Bleh. Okay, so we decently documented the main class. So obviously I could also have multi-line comments, but those aren't commonly used. So I thought I'd leave them out. I could also, instead of putting them above, I could put them to the side, like this. That's perfectly fine as well. It's up to your coding style preference. Let's go ahead and talk about naming conventions that Java has. Now, by no means do you need to follow these conventions, but it definitely is recommended, especially in terms of professional fields. Like if you wanted to get a job, I would suggest following these naming conventions. So we've talked about packages a little bit already. And the naming scheme for a package is, for the first dot, you want a top-level domain like com, org, me, gov, edu, net, whatever. So, like for example, you have net.minecraft.src. Like this is pretty close to a legitimate Minecraft package because they do have a Java edition. If I did me, that's perfectly fine. You just do what makes sense for this project. Then you put dot. This second dot is like your division or your department. So you could do like IT or human resources or whatever. It doesn't matter. You can put your division or department. You can put your project, such as tutorial. You can put your machine, PC, or Windows, or something along those lines. You can put your login, like Joshua. Just anything along those lines that makes sense. So if I say Joshua, that's fine. Then you have your category, which is something like SRC, or graphics, or files, or something like that. I'll stick with SRC. Then we've got classes, interfaces, and enums. Alright, so we'll just stick with class for now since that's what you guys know. So a class, its naming convention is to have Pascal case, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Basically what that means is you uppercase every word. So uppercase every word, like this. Okay? You can also, they also say that you should avoid acronyms like talk to you later or LOL. Okay, so avoid those. Avoid abbreviations as well. So don't go ahead and sing concat str, like for concatenate string. Don't do that. Just spell it out. Concatenate string. Okay, spell the whole thing out. Unless if it is something common, like URL or HTML or something along those lines. Okay? Let's go ahead and just say my class in here. So methods, they are what are known as camel case. So if I say public void method, this is fine. But if you have multiple words, such as my method, the first word is lowercase, but the words after it is super awesome, are all uppercase. Okay? So the first word is lowercase, the words after are uppercase. And a method should generally be a verb, such as run or get background, like that. Then we've got our variables. The variables are similar. They are camel case and they should be descriptive. So if you want to say the width of something, you shouldn't just say W, okay? But you should instead say width or my width in camel case, okay? There are throwaway variable names, such as I, J, K, M, and N for integers. And remember, this works because of the shortcut that I showed you. I'm just not setting them equal to something. And then there's character, which is C, D, and E. Those are common throwaways. For example, with our for int I equals 0, that's a throwaway I variable. However, your variables should be descriptive so that people know what's going on. However, it should not take light years to read. It shouldn't be something like this. It should be succinct. It should be short, but descriptive. And finally, there are constants. Now, constant inside, so constant is when we use this final keyword, right? The constant inside of here still is camel case with, it's just basically it treated like a variable. However, when we're out here inside the class and say like private, static, final, int, that's what I refer to as constant. And that is camel case, or not camel case, snake case, and uppercase. Okay, so like max width equals 1920. Private, static, final, int, max height equals 1080. Something like that. To where there's undercases for snake case. And so every word would be like with an underscore. So my underscore max underscore height, width, my max height, all capitals. And that's for constants. Let's go over the Java lang package. So if you notice here, this string is a class. It's a different class underneath the Java, underneath the java.lang package. Well, why don't we need to import it? That's because Java automatically imports java.lang package, always. So let's go over some classes that are under the java.lang package, some common classes. First of all, we have system. System is in the Java lang package. If I type this out and hover over it, it's from java.lang, so you don't need to import it. And you have string, string builder, and string buffer. Those three are all from the Java lang package. If I hover over it, java.lang, error. And this is java.lang as well, but it's not wanting to show because I didn't complete the statement. Next up are the primitive data types. So if I say byte b equals 0, this is a primitive data type, but we can wrap it in a class with a capital B. Okay? This is from the Java lang, and this is the case with short, with integer, with long, with float, with double, with character, and with Boolean. Okay, all of them have their own data type wrap. They all have their own wrappers so that you can use them as a class rather than a primitive data type. These are all found in the lang package. Don't need to import them. Next up is exception. So when we do try catch, exception E. Exception is part of the Java lang package. The same is true of error. Error is a little different from exception, but they're both needing to be caught when they are thrown. But the error is part of the java.lang package as well. Let's talk about some new concepts with the lang package, such as math. Math is one of these. So if I say double A equals 5.0, double B equals 2.0, then, oopsie daisy, double C equals A divided by B. Okay, if I print this out and run it, we get 2.5. Well, the math class exists to provide a bunch of different functions, including pi, absolute values, a cosine, a tangent, cosine, exponents, floor, get exponent. It provides a ton of different functions, including rounding. So if I wanted to say C equals math.round of C, it'll round it up for me to 3. And if I do minus 0.1, then it'll become 2 because it goes from 2.5 to 2.4, which is now rounded down. If I type in seal, this will now go up to 3 because now I'm rounding up always. So there's so many different methods. There's sine, there's pi. If I run this, now we're gonna see pi inside of our console. If I run the absolute of negative C, right? So negative C, let's just go ahead and say negative A divided by B. So if I run this, you'll see that it says negative 2.5 now. If we run the absolute of C, now it's 2.5. So there's tons of different things you can do with the math class. Next up is the thread class. So thread is decently important. Not a lot of people use it. Oops. One way that you can understand this as is running things simultaneously. Okay, if I hover over it, it is from java.lang. So like, for example, you can do something like thread.sleep and enter in the amount of milliseconds that you want to sleep. If I type in 1,000, and this does require a try and a catch, so surround with try catch, and it gives us the interrupted exception if the thread is interrupted. If we go ahead and say something like system.out.println first, and then underneath it we say second and run it, we'll say first, then second after 1 second, because that's 1,000 milliseconds. So you can use threading to do that if you'd like. You can also use threading, like I said, to do simultaneous code or asynchronous operations if you'd like. But that's not something I'm going to be covering in this series, so you can look into that a little bit more on your own if you would like. But thread is also a decently important class from the java.lang. For our final topic today, let's go ahead and go over a little bit more on syntax. So we know that if I say int a equals 0, this is perfectly fine. But what if I added a bunch of spaces here? Would this still work as intended? So if I say system.out.println a and run it, it still runs it as 0. In fact, let's make it 10 because the default is 0. It still runs as 10. What if I add a bunch of spaces here and here? Bunch of spaces everywhere. it still runs as 10. You do not need to have them all neat and next to each other in order for it to run. In fact, let's go ahead and say int a equals 10, like this. And it prints out 10 still. Now, one thing that's not acceptable is to combine it with its data type. Then it's not going to know the data type. But that's all okay. One more thing that is okay is if you have it on another line. If you have it on multiple lines like this and run it, it'll still say 10. The reason why is because the semicolon acts as the end of the sentence, so to say. It's like our period. And so, this is like breaking up the sentence on multiple lines. And then you say, this is the end of the statement here. So this is all right to do. In fact, you can have the semicolon way down here if you'd like, and run it, and it still says 10. However, if you want to be more proper about it, just keep doing what I have been showing you, like this. Okay? One thing that's not acceptable is adding an enter in between words, like this. It's perfectly fine if it's a string. So if I were to say string a equals hello and then I press enter here. Come on. If I press enter here, this is perfectly fine. This will run fine. This, on the other hand, will not. Okay? So just be mindful of where you have your line breaks and everything like that. Going on from there, let's go ahead and talk about an inline if-else. So if I have int a equals 5, we can say something along the lines of string b is equal to blank. Then we can say if a equals 5, then we'll say b is equal to is equal. Otherwise, we can say b is equal to is not equal. Then we print out b. So if we run this, it should say is equal, right? Because a is equal to 5. But what if we want to do this all inside of one line? Well, the way that you do that is first you have your condition. So a equals 5. Okay, so you have your Boolean, your condition. Then you say question mark. Then you have what you want to set it equal to inside of, to the right of this question mark. So I can say is equal inside of here. Then, if it's not, you put a colon and you say is not equal. This does the same exact thing as this. Okay, so we're checking if a equals 5. If it is, then run this and save it to your string. If it's not, then run this and save it to your string. So if I get rid of this and run it, you'll see it says is equal just like before. If I make this 6, it'll say is not equal. That's the end of this episode. Next episode, we will be covering encapsulation and polymorphism in Java. Thanks for watching. Feel free to comment what your thoughts are on the series so far down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss a video. Bye!